Hey everyone, Wayne here. Today we're going to do an overview and review of Claws of the Tiger, the Japanese Invasion of Malaya, 1941 to 1942, designed by Steve Poole, or Stephen Poole, published by White Dog Games. This covers a campaign that you don't see in a whole lot of games. There's a few out there, but none that I had actually played. So I was definitely intrigued when I heard about this one, and I want to check it out. And I've been playing it and enjoying myself, and so now I'll kind of talk to you guys about the game a little bit and give you my final thoughts, the usual jazz. So let's start off with the overview. I have everything set up here for the solo game, and yes, this can either be a two-player or a solitaire game. There's a fog of war aspect with your forces, which I think you guys can see pretty simply out here on the map. You're going to have the different forces, the Japanese and British forces, and they're represented by a force marker. And over here on the right-hand side, I've set up the actual tactical sheets, the force detail sheets, and I'll move the camera over and we'll take a closer look at that. But what you're doing is, on the map itself, you just have one little counter representing a force, British Force D, Japanese Force A, and then off to the side, you'll have your tactical sheet, your force detail sheet, where you'll actually keep track of all of your forces. So if you're doing it a two-player game, obviously you have a really good fog of war aspect. You hide, whichever side, you hide your sheet from your opponent until you're committed to battle, and then you reveal kind of what forces you're using. Yeah, but it also works actually really well for solitaire. It seems like, well, how would that work for solitaire? First of all, there's rules determining what forces, how many forces you're going to use. But what I also find myself is that when I'm the attacker, maybe I'm looking and saying, okay, I commit to attacks, which in the solitaire game he plays the British, the Japanese controlled by the AI, the bot, if you will. I'll say, if I'm the British and it's my turn, I might say, well, yeah, I think I'm gonna attack here and I'll do it. And I just don't look at the sheet showing how many forces the Japanese have. And then as for the Japanese, they're controlled by the system, which doesn't really worry about necessarily the force size of your army. So there's no worries until you're playing it, until you get into the combat, which I'll describe later. So, like I said, 1941 to 1942 starts December 1941. The point of the game, and I'm going to go ahead and move the camera a little bit here, folks. So starts moving a little bit. Just be aware, I am doing it on purpose. We have, I want to show the map a little better here, kind of show what we have. So the Japanese are landing, turn one, here we go, December 1941. And there's going to be 4 turns in each month until the end of February, historically when the British surrendered Singapore. Which, speaking of Singapore, brings me to the point of how you win the game, or lose the game, I should say. The Japanese are landing up here, coming down from the north, landing on the east coast up here, and they're working their way down the Malay Peninsula. They work their way down, and you're trying to hold them off. As the British player, I'm looking at it from the solitaire perspective here, because that's what I focus on, solitaire war games. As a British player, you're trying to hold them back, because eventually they're going to get down, and they're going for Singapore. And the game will guide them. You can actually see kind of a couple different paths here based on the roads. There's sort of an eastern/central path, and then there's more of a west coast kind of path. Those are the 2 paths that the AI, the Japanese forces, will follow as they make their way down to Singapore. If they capture Singapore, you lose, which that happens a lot because it is a tough game, which historically they did. So I will tell you up front, it's a little tough game, but at the same time, it is a lot of fun. So I know, a little bit of a spoiler, right? Trying to think anything else here with the actually covering it. So beautiful map, as you guys can see. I really like how the map looks. You have a little terrain effects chart. You're not gonna have to reference it a ton because most of the things are gonna be similar. You're gonna know that if it's a different type of terrain, it's probably gonna add +2 to the defender, and then the movement points. Generally, it's going to be half a point on the road, 1 point for clear, and then 1.5 for basically any other terrain other than the mountains, which are impassable. So that is the overview. The AI will guide the forces. You either are activating a certain amount with these activation counters per turn. Both you, the Japanese, then have 4 automatically. You roll to determine, so you never know exactly how many forces you're going to activate. So a lot of times you may only get 2 activation markers. So you can only activate 2 of your forces on a map. You may have 4 5, 6, right? You start off the game with 6 different forces on the map. You can only activate a maximum of 4. You may only get to activate 2. So to be very smart on what you pick. Japanese are always going to activate 4. Eventually, they're going to probably have more than just those 4 on the board, in which case the game comes with these solo markers. You go ahead and draw from the cup whichever one's Japanese forces are on the map, and you basically determine who's going to activate from there. All right, so you guys saw the kind of the map as a whole. Now I've zoomed in a little bit just to demonstrate. So I'm not going to run through everything on how the Japanese solitaire rules work. There's a flow chart. I also have a little cheat sheet I'm going to upload to Board Game Geek, but basically the game comes with the sheet you need, the bot, the flow chart. It tells you, hey, you move here, move there. It tells you the path they take. They're going to Singapore is what they're doing. They just have a couple different paths they're going to take. Along the way, they're going to capture ports, which are going to give them access to, and capture airfields, airfields, which then give them additional air support points, which I'll talk about that during combat. But we're kind of skipping ahead here. So zoom down part of the map. So you can imagine that the Japanese right now are on the offensive. So they would have been activated, and whether the British force is maybe in their path on their way to Singapore, or if the British force was adjacent, it's going to go ahead and attack them. So what I'm going to do is just kind of show you here a little bit, real quick. So we have Force A of the Japanese, and as soon as I'm done showing you this, I'm going to jump over to the Japanese tactical sheets, the Japanese and British tactical sheets, and we'll kind of go through that, okay? So we're going to have the Japanese Force A is attacking the British Force E here. Now, very simple. They're adjacent. They're going to attack them. You have a pre-attack hex, which is where the Japanese force is here. It's going to go ahead and it's moving into the the defender hex here, where the British force E is. Now, you go ahead and you look at terrain. You're usually crossing a bridge, and then you look at the terrain in the actual hex that's being attacked. Is this the combat hex? The combat hex. So does it have is it jungle? Is it clear? Is he in a town? Is it crossing a bridge? It's kind of the standard things you see in war games, right? So in this case, it's just regular road, no bridge. It's not in the jungle, which does benefit the Japanese quite a bit in the game, which is historically accurate. The Commonwealth forces had a lot of trouble in the jungle. Japanese forces had a big advantage there. So as the British are always going to want to avoid that. You are in a town, so you're going to +2 to your rolls. I should say to your combat value, which let's go ahead and go over to combat, and then we'll figure that out. All right, so over here we have the force sheets. You would normally leave the force counters on the map where the battle is actually taking place. I just went ahead and took them off and set them next to it so you guys would kind of remember, and I would remember as well, what forces are involved in this particular battle. But what you do is you go ahead and look at the forces that are available. So you can see Japanese Force A on our force detail sheet. So see Force A, Force B, Force C, etc. Same thing for the British. You can see Force C over here. What you're going to do is you're actually going to go ahead and roll. The Japanese get to roll 3d6, and the British roll 2d6. And what you're rolling is determining how many combat units you get to send into the battle. The Japanese have an advantage. They get to roll the 3d6 to select the 2 highest. The British only get to roll 2d6. This just represents the difficulty the British had in actually engaging the forces, getting enough of their forces. Because remember, or if you don't know, they actually outnumbered the Japanese during the entire campaign, yet they got pushed back, and eventually had to surrender. So, combination of poor leadership, poor training, poor tactics, etc. So, you see that represented with a lot of the modifiers and the little things like this. So, little bits of Chrome that are easy. They don't really add anything to the game and rules-wise. They don't add to the complexity, but they do add to the game for creating Chrome and creating that bits of history in it. So in this case, we would go ahead and we start with the Japanese, and you can see the combat units here. So we're gonna have artillery, tanks or armored, and infantry. Pretty simple stuff, right? Like most games. And then they do rotate almost like blocks, and they rotate to show the value. And in this particular case, so Force A right now, you can see we have 1 artillery, 1 armored, 7 infantry. It's a little hard to see the 7, but that's the 7 that's up. They're all at full strength. None are weakened. Everything starts at full strength. As you engage in combats, they become weakened over time. So, all right. So the Japanese would go ahead and roll. They'd roll their 3d6. And you go ahead and look, and they get to go ahead and select the 2 highest. So in this case, would be the 6 and the 5. So they get to do 11. So they can commit up to 11 units. Which, what do they have here? 7, 8, 9. So they have 9. So they would go ahead and they would commit all 9. And they take them out of their force detail box, and they move them up to the Japanese tactical detail sheet. And then obviously these are all full strength, so go ahead and place them over there. Now for the British, you go ahead and you just roll the 2d6. Okay, a total of 6. So you already can see that theoretically they may not be able to even offer as many forces up. Now, 4C that the Japanese are fighting down here, right here, they only have 4 infantry and 1 artillery, so they only have 5 anyway, so the roll didn't affect this. But you're going to see forces that have, you know, like say this Japanese force here has 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Odds are all 12 are not going to be able to engage in a combat. It's possible, but that's pretty rare. All right, so we have our forces all arrayed up here. And these different dice, I added them in just to keep track of things. Let's go ahead and pause the video here, and I'm going to get into the combat. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and we'll work our way through this combat. The combat is the most complex part of this game. It's not complex. There's a few steps. There's definitely multiple steps you have to work your way through, maybe a dozen of them. But they're all listed. They're listed in the rulebook, and my cheat sheet on Board Game Week will have them listed as well. So they're really not hard. I mean, you play a couple turns, you got them down anyway. You just go through the list. So let's kind of demonstrate. So this is the same combat we talked about, which was between Japanese Force A and British Force E. They are in a town that the British are holding. So the British are going to have that advantage of being in that better defensive terrain. Other than that, I know you see a bunch of dice around here. I'm going to explain as we go, okay, guys? So let's go ahead and jump in. So we already did, and this is part of the combat, was the rolling to determine, how many units are there. Just a reminder, the Japanese, they have their 7 infantry, they have a tank or armored unit, and then they have an artillery. The British have 4 infantry and 1 artillery. Ooh, doesn't look so good for them, but hey, we're gonna see what happens here. You never know. All right, so the first step is determining each side's basic combat value. The basic combat value is just looking at the actual forces that are participating in the combat. Not the ones that maybe are part of their army, down here that got left behind, but the ones that are actually participating in this combat right here. So, very simple. Every full strength unit counts as 2 BCVs, basic combat unit like value or combat value. Every weakened unit only counts as 1. Right now they're all full strength, so super easy math. We have a total of 5 units over here for the British. And this, now I'm showing you guys what I have the dice for. I have these out to keep track of the combat values because you will add up. Like I said, there's like 12 steps. So you're going to keep adding. So you're going to have a counter. So a D20, a D30, you can use a piece of paper. You could use a handful of smaller dice. You got D10s. Just grab 2 or 3 D10s. You'll be good there. So just whatever works to keep track of it. Simple as that. That's why I use these. No, the game does not come with them, but we're gamers, right? We all have a bunch of dice. I don't care if you use D6s, because in fact, if I get to 20 or more, I usually use an extra D6, so no big deal. But you're probably going to want something to keep track of the combat values. So, all right. So we have 5 units at full strength for the British. So 5 times 2. Remember, 2 each for full strength gives them 10. So go ahead and just find the 10 on here. That's what I do. So go ahead and record it as 10. All right, let's go over to the Japanese. They have 7, 8, 9. So 9 times 2 is 18. So they have 18 combat value already. So already they're 8 ahead. Not good. Not looking good for the British in this fight, I'll tell you that. So, all right, so that's the basic combat value. Now you go ahead and look at things like, are there attackers, defenders, so whichever side, do they have any forces adjacent to them? If so, they gain a +2. In this combat example, nope, they're solo, just fighting each other. Nobody else is adjacent. You then look at terrain. So the terrain for the defender, so it's in that combat hex. Remember, if they crossed a bridge, are they in the jungle, anything like that. In this case, the British were in a town or city, which means that they get a +2 to their BCV, basic combat value. So it goes from 10 to a 12. Now you look at, again, and make sure you don't forget the jungle. I have on my cheat sheet, I have it listed separate that the Japanese, if it takes place in a jungle, they gain a +2 to their combat, because they have a big advantage in the jungle, historically accurate. Then you go ahead and you actually look at, and I really like this combat system. So you look at the actual composition of your forces now. What you may think of is combined arms advantage, right? Everyone knows that term. I'm familiar with like war games. So in this particular case, for the British, they have some infantry, doesn't matter how much, some infantry and an artillery. that means they have two different types of units. Remember, there's artillery, there's armor, and then there's infantry. They have two different types. They're going to get a +2, so they're going to go up to a 14. That's not so bad. Unfortunately for the British, the Japanese have artillery, armor, and infantry. That gives a +4. So if you have all three, you get a +4. So see already, look, 20. And then I'll just go ahead and I'll use this bone-colored die to add it to. So now we're at 22 combat value so far. Now you look at air support points. The British, and again, historically accurate, use them while you got them. The British only have their air support points, and that's what these dice are for. They get 2 to start with, and during the first 2 turns of the game, the British have 2 air support points each turn. After that, they have none, which represents the British Air Force being wiped out. The British Air Force over the Malay Peninsula being wiped out. So use them while you got them, for sure. So what we'll do is, since we're looking at air support points, and the Japanese, they start off with 2 in the first turn, and then it'll start becoming based off of how many airfields they capture. The airfields are little icons on the map. You can go back to the map part and you'll see them on the map where the cities are, where most of the towns are. So in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and use all of ours as the British. So let's go ahead and I just kind of throw it aside. Say I'm going to use both points. Let's bump up to 16. And the Japanese, according to the bot, play aid, they automatically use all of their air support points for the first combat. So +2, so their 22 becomes a 24. You can have, obviously, house rule if you wanted to say maybe split it up, because they can have up to 4 eventually. That's a max of 4. You may split it up, but according to the rules, they put them all into that first attack. So, all right, so we have the air support points adjusted. Let me double check here. Yep. Now you would check to see if any of the forces have been involved in combat before this turn. If they have, they'll be reduced. The British by 4, the Japanese by 2. Again, this does show that the Japanese recover faster, more prepared for this style of combat in this terrain, etc., etc. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes I'll mark my forces after they've been in a battle, especially if I know that there's enemies nearby and there's probably more than one combat with that force. I'll just put like a little marker, a little chit, or a cube on top of my force on the map, just to keep track of that. So just represents how they're worn down, they've used equipment, they're tired, etc. All right, that's it. That is the basic combat value. Now what we do is we have our that's the adjusted combat value, excuse me. So it gets a little complicated, but again, just go down the list here. So now I have our adjusted combat value of 16 for the British and 24 for the Japanese. Not good for them. Now we roll a 1d6 for each side. In this case, red will be for the British, white for the Japanese. Go ahead and add it. And now this is the final combat value. So 16 plus 4 is a total of 20. 24 plus 3, 27. So, the difference is 7. What that means is the British will suffer because they're that disadvantage, right? Whoever has the highest inflicts it on the loser of the battle. British are the loser of the battle of this one, unfortunately for them. They're going to suffer 7 hits. Now, what you do is every unit that's full strength is worth 2 hits. A unit that's weakened is worth 1. So in this case, we have 7 hits. The British, we have 7 hits we have to suffer. We have 4 infantry and artillery. We might say, okay, all 4 infantry take a hit. Each one takes a hit. That's 4 hits. We're going to have our artillery take a hit. That makes them weakened as well. So that's 5 hits now we've suffered. Now we have 2 hits left we have to suffer. I don't want to lose artillery, so I'm going to take the 2 out of the infantry here. They're at 4. Well, they're weakened, though, so each hit eliminates 1, so down to 3, down to 2. So now we're down to 2 weakened infantry and 1 weakened artillery. And that was all 7 hits. Now, there's a couple other things that involved. Depending on how many hits are inflicted, and depending on what was rolled for that final combat roll die, it actually depends on what you can hit and what happens. Let me explain here. So, when hits are inflicted, the defender picks where they take them, right? Like I just did here. However, if the attacker, or whoever it is, right? So either side, whoever's inflicting the hits, right? If they roll a 5 or 6 with their combat die, a 5, they get to choose where 1 hit goes. And if they roll a 6, 2 of the hits, they get to choose where they go, assuming there are 2 hits, right? So, for instance, if I had rolled higher and I won the battle, and I had rolled a 6, I may say, well, I want one hit inflict on the tank and the other on artillery, or I want both on this armored unit, tank, whatever. That way he's completely eliminated. It's your choice if you roll a 5 or a 6. And then there's a little chart for the Japanese roll a 5 or 6. It tells you they prioritize armors first, artillery, then infantry. At the same time, you're also checking for what the total differential was. So in this case, we had a differential of 7, which, according to how the game works, how the combat works, is if the differential is 3 or less, the defending force remains in that combat hex. The attacker goes back to their pre-combat hex. So kind of, almost like an exchange result, right? Like nothing. There's some losses, but nothing else happens. If the differential is 4, 5, 6, or 7, the losing force actually has to retreat 2 hexes. Which we roll what? We were at a differential of 7. Okay. So we had our 7 losses over for the British. Let's go ahead and do that. Or excuse me, we just did. Now, the attacker also suffers losses. They suffer half the losses that the loser did, minus 2. I keep saying attacker, defender. I just want you to make aware that what I mean is the winner of the battle and the loser of the battle, right? Because it doesn't matter who's the attacker, defender. It matters who won, who had the total higher combat value versus who had the lesser one, right? That's what I mean, winner, loser. So the winner had inflicted 7 hits. Now the winner on the loser, excuse me. Now the winner still takes hits. He takes half of what the loser took, so would be 3.5. Drop the remainder. So he takes 3 hits. And none of this was a 5 or 6. So he gets to go ahead and choose where he wants to take these 3 hits. So what we're gonna do, we're at 7. Let's drop this to 4 full strength. Grab another chit, and we'll go ahead and add a 3 weakened here. So to show 3 of our infantry were weakened. Or of the Japanese infantry, I mean. So now, on the map, I'm not going to go back to the map, but the British losing the battle here would have to retreat 2 passable hexes. If they're unable to retreat, or if they're adjacent to an enemy, and there's no option, they're going to all be eliminated. So it doesn't happen often though, but you always want to keep that in mind when you're engaging in combat. Now here's where it gets really interesting too. So if the differential is 8 or more, the winning player suffers no hits. So that's just to show you, hey, so if you crush the enemy, right, and say you're over by 10, I've had that 10, 12, whatever, you don't then take 6 hits as the winner. In fact, you basically crush them, so you don't take any hits. Not only that, you get to pick the retreat route of the loser. So you get to go ahead and you can kind of move them off in the middle of nowhere. Now, you can't send them into oblivion. You can't move them where they're eliminated, assuming that there's a place they can move where they're okay. You do have to move them somewhere where, they're not eliminated, if that's an option. But you can still move them kind of off the road or get them out of the way or whatever you want to do. So it's a really nice little feature of the combat. And that is the combat for Claws of the Tiger. All right, guys. So I did my overview. We looked into combat. Hopefully got a good idea how it works. There's a lot of steps in the combat. I just want to reiterate that. But it's not complicated. It's not complex at all. Very easy to run through. So, final thoughts. What do I think of this game, right? You're saying, Wayne, I don't know. What do you think of it, man? I couldn't tell. Okay, you could probably tell, right? I love it. I really like this game. So, this is the first one I have on the Malayan conflict here. Invasion of Malaya. And I'm glad I have it because this is a great game. Steve Poole did a great job creating a game that, and I actually don't know if he did the solitaire rules as well, but did a great job of creating a game that I could see being really fun face-to-face. Really fun, actually 2-player, but also is a great solitaire game. And it's got the solitaire rules, it's got the bot, and 9 times out of 10, the decisions make sense, everything works on it. It's very rare that there's been somewhere I went, why is it doing that? No, in fact, the way it works is pretty simple and clever. Works within the system. And yeah, the game is helped because of the fact that, Japanese have a goal, Singapore in mind. They're marching down the Malaya Peninsula. They have just a couple paths really to take anyway. So it kind of maybe constricts them naturally. But that's all within the campaign. That's all within reality. So the solitaire bot works really well for that. When it comes to combat, there's a lot of steps to run through. You will stumble your first few combats, right? As you're running through all these steps. Again, the rulebook does have them all listed. They're all listed in a row. Very easy. Just follow down, like A through F style, right? Like just follow down, and you'll get through it. And it's not that complicated. I like how I like the little modifiers. When I first played it, I thought, oh, there's a lot of these different like little things that change the combat. I don't know if I like that. That was my first couple combats, right? Because I just wasn't used to it. I wasn't comfortable yet. Once I became comfortable with it, even though yes, I still have to refer to the combat chart to make sure I'm doing it right. It's super simple. I just glance over at it. Okay, yep, that. Okay, don't forget this, don't forget this. But every modifier makes sense, right? I mean, you're looking at, first of all, how many units can even fight? I mean, just because you have a force in a hex doesn't mean everyone is available to fight, right? Um, and you look at, okay, are they weakened? Are they full strength? What's the terrain? Standard, pretty standard stuff. Okay, combined arms. For a game that is so simple with such simple rules, the fact that it takes into account things like combined arms, certain training for the defender, if a force has been attacked or been involved in a combat already this turn, etc., etc. All those things really add up. You know, the air support abstracted to just, you know, a couple modifiers, but nice and easy to use, doesn't make you think too much. Once you're used to it, you're going to fly through the turns and you're going to know pretty quick, okay, you know, is the British, am I getting pushed back and I'm done for? Or, hey, am I holding them off long enough that I may actually win this? Or it may force a draw, which is still better than the historical result. So overall, I recommend this game. Solitaire game, very unique topic, or fairly, I'm gonna say very unique, right? There's a few games out there on this campaign, this topic, but I had never played one. I haven't played every game though. So if you have played one, you may want to check into this, see if you want a different one, to see if you want something that has a solitaire mode included. That I think also would be really good two-player, face-to-face, or you know, online, whatever you play Bass or anything like that. So let me know what you think below. I think they did a great job. Of course, I already talked about this even in my unboxing. The artwork's great. Counters are simple but look really nice. Map looks great, etc. Great job. Another fantastic game from White Dog Games. Another good solitaire game. I love the fact that they're putting out so many really good solitaire games that, you know, as most of us are not, you know, getting into gaming groups right now, we're able to just play these games solo and have fun with them. And this is another one that I recommend you check out. If there's any interest in the campaign, any interest in the history, look this one up. I'm guessing you'll like it. So let me know what you think of this video below. Comment. You can give me a thumbs up if you want. If you're not subscribed, for one of the 65% of my viewers that are not subscribed, please subscribe. It really just helps me to be able to put out more videos, to show publishers that, you know, I have viewers that are very interested and engaged, and I know you guys are. I have a lot of great viewers. I hear from you guys. You post comments on my videos. You email me. You message me on Board Game Week, and I love it. I love hearing from you guys. So let me know if you played this one. If you're interested in it, go pick it up from White Dog Games. Other than that, until next time, guys. Later.